My name is Willy Bolander. I study influence, persuasion, and leadership in selling and sales management, and I teach people how to sell. In this podcast, we'll talk to some of the world's top sales leaders and see what we can learn from them. Welcome to the Sales Lab. Every year in November, Florida State University hosts a massive event in Orlando, Florida. For business students, this is a sales role play and case competition, an opportunity to compete and get exposed to job opportunities with some of the world's best sales organizations. For companies, this is an unbelievable recruitment opportunity, bringing several hundred of the nation's best students, all already interested in starting their careers in sales, into one location for you to meet. So if you're a student looking to differentiate yourself and secure your dream job in sales, a marketing or sales professor looking to show off your students and connect them with great opportunities, or a sales manager or recruiter looking to acquire top sales talent, come learn more about the International Collegiate Sales Competition at www.icsc-fsu.com. That's www.icsc-fsu.com. Hello, welcome to part one of my conversation with Laura Hume. Laura is the talent development lead for the Americas at IBM. It's a discussion that was sort of facilitated by a former student of mine, Trevor, and we pick on him a little bit in another part of the discussion, but it turned out to be really interesting. I kind of went in not knowing exactly what to expect, and I think we covered some very interesting things. For now, I'll just highlight this idea of when you're evaluating salespeople in terms of hiring them or in terms of their developmental needs after they're hired, looking at skill, will, and self-regulation. If you don't know what that means, listen to this part of the conversation. Thanks a lot. Hope you get something out of it. We are here with Laura Hume. She's a partner at IBM and the North American Talent Development Lead. Laura, thank you for joining us.
Howdy. Glad to be here.
I met Laura because one of my former students, Trevor Wilpin, went to work for you and kind of connected us. How's Trevor doing? Is he driving you crazy?
Terrible. No, he's awesome. I love working with him, and it's been, I told my partner team, this is the first time I've actually had upward mentorship work.
Meaning?
Well, I've been in I jump into all kinds of projects and programs, and I've been assigned an upward mentor, meaning somebody who's more junior in their careers, and it's supposed to be very insightful. And oftentimes we kind of, because it's an assigned thing and we don't have a purpose for work, we sort of stare at each other and go, what are we supposed to be doing here? How are you supposed to be mentoring me other than helping with some technology stuff, which I'm always happy to get the help. But Trevor, because he has a sales background and working with your program as well, and he does have the great technical skills, and he's just an awesome guy, I have actually found the upward mentorship works. And it's just been interesting to think, oh, maybe we need to put some different parameters, that it's not a program outside of work. It is a program inside the flow of your work to make it really effective.
That's interesting. Well, it seems to me that there's a lot of things that are very valuable managerial functions and can help facilitate success and performance and growth, but often don't look like the work you're supposed to be doing, right? Even something I was joking with my students earlier this week, something like thinking, which I know our undergrad students and younger people are sometimes at least thought to have a hard time just slowing down, putting down the phone, sitting in silence and just thinking about a problem, even for 5 or 10 minutes, without disruption. So you're saying mentorship should be one of those things that isn't viewed as nice to have, but maybe should be a necessary part of the work environment. That's interesting. Now, how prevalent is the use of this upward mentor program? Is that something that's happening in a lot of companies? Is it all through IBM?
Oh, I have seen it in little spots across multiple companies. Every company I've worked in has launched some sort of a program like that. And I've been in consulting, so professional services, for 4 years now. And I think because of that, there's even more pressure to make sure that the more junior folks are connected to the more senior folks, because it's really easy. It tends to be hierarchical organizations. And if you get more than one level away, it's harder to make the connection. So, leadership, HR steps in and tries to sort of force those connections, which is really well intentioned, but I think sometimes just falls flat, because if you're sort of sitting with a stranger that you've not worked with before and you don't have work specifically to do, just coming up with some sort of a program, it's just hard to make that flow.
So is it better if it just emerges naturally?
Yes, but I think you have to give the opportunities to do that kind of skip jump where somebody who's
Mm.
quite junior in their career can actually be working with somebody who's, old and dusty like I am.
I see. Well, that what you're describing is very interesting because when we research things like organizational climate or kind of informal social networks and sales organizations, we're always kind of stuck in this strange position of saying, the reason that these things help predict performance or increase performance is because they're emergent. It's because they're informal. And the manager's job at that point becomes trying to facilitate these types of things without forcing them, right? Because the moment it's forced, it's no longer informal. It's no longer emergent.
Right.
And so there's an interesting tightrope to walk between, okay, I want to set things in motion. I want to conduct some networking events with different departments and hope that that situation facilitates some interesting connections where people can work together and become more successful. But if I'd say, person A, person B, you guys buddy up, you need to learn from each other, that's just a completely different phenomenon.
Exactly. And I think that door number two doesn't work as well. I'll say Trevor does not report to me. I wish he reported to me. Trevor does not report to me. This was a volunteer program where we're doing some work where the senior leadership is trying to make sure that there's they're credentialized, there's a voice. It's called our Eminence program, which sounds very, I don't know. I always squint when I have to say it. It sounds so fa-fa, but it's our Eminence program for the leadership team, just so we can credentialize ourselves and provide thought leadership, because most of us have been in our fields for a very long time and are working with numerous clients, and we are encouraged to do that. One of the ways we are encouraged to do that is we get an Eminence manager, and that manager is more junior in their careers, and they help in all kinds of ways, helping navigate social media, helping with technology, helping pitch ideas, even ghostwriting ideas, and having the partner be able to say, yep, that's exactly right, or at least it gives me something to throw darts at. Really all kinds of things that the Eminence manager could do. And it's a volunteer position because they know they may get some goodies out of it. Hopefully, I try to make sure I've brought Trevor to a conference. I bring him to my team meeting so he can kind of get deeper in my space and talent development and the clients we're working with and the problems we're seeing so he can get some business acumen. But he helps me a tremendous amount, and it's above and beyond, but it really is in the flow of work. So it's a work activity. There's a purpose for our interaction, and I think it's going quite well. And I think Trevor would say it's going. If he's told me, he thinks it's going quite well.
Very good. So you're at IBM, huge company. They have identified you, if I'm understanding correctly, as a thought leader, and then plugged you into this Eminence program. And then you and Trevor and probably some other people are working together to do sort of outreach, present a public face of what it means, to be an expert at IBM or something like that. Is that the gist?
Yes, it's a little mix between personal branding and actually, so I'm not publishing under IBM's banner. I actually may do that, but that's not part of the Eminence program. This is more really making sure that the people who are leading in our areas, and this is a global program, by the way, we have some really great Eminence leaders in Europe and in Asia Pacific, and that we're publishing blog. We have a little Trevor and I put together a little, we call it Laura's Riffs, and it's a little video series. Once a week I try to get one out, and it's like a 3 to 5 minute video of sort of a thought of the day, but they're around leadership topics, talent development topics for me. Other people are posting around artificial intelligence and talent acquisition topics. So everybody kind of speaks to it's just to keep kind of movement going and a voice from people who are at IBM. So it's a little formal, a little informal. It's not published from our IBV, our Institute of Business Value, which is our research arm. That it's not that, but it's pretty active.
Yeah, that's interesting. One, because it's not, they're not forcing it to be branded under IBM.
Yep.
I mean, that's, I think, a very interesting and probably strategic decision. Do you have any insight into that, or that's just how it
That's
was
one of
presented
the
to you?
reasons I really love it. I've wanted to do this. I started off as an English teacher 1,000 years ago, and because of that, I think I'm just a frustrated writer. And I've wanted to do a blog, and I've offered to do that with other companies. IBM was the first company that was like, "Yes, we actually have a program for that." And I chose video because that's what I end up looking at when I'm on LinkedIn. It almost always catches my attention if somebody's done a video. So we're trying it. I love the mix of it is sponsored by IBM in that they have this formal program outlined, and I get to have Trevor help me with that. But it is not formal in that I am not speaking on behalf of IBM. I'm speaking on behalf of me and my background in talent and learning and what I see at multiple clients over these many years of professional services.
Good. The term thought leader is always kind of an interesting one to me because, I go on LinkedIn and I see people with some frequency describing themselves as thought leaders. And I think that just doesn't seem like a great headline to me. And I just pulled up your LinkedIn to make sure that that's not your headline before I brought this up. So you're in the clear, but it's kind of like running around telling people that you're very good looking, maybe, but
Don't you do that, Willie?
you can't say that. I mean, I do that, but with some profoundly negative social consequences. But there's certain things you just can't say about yourself. You can't say you're funny, you can't say you're good looking, and you can't say you're a thought leader. That's for other people to say. So it's I think this is probably a good structure that it's your organization, which happens to be a gigantic, successful organization, IBM, saying, no, we've identified this person as a thought leader, and we're trying to facilitate her outreach and personal branding. This is very interesting. I mean, this
And
is
it's
kind of the sort of thing that,
fascinating hearing that response because I think this idea of thought leader for the senior folks in consulting is so pervasive we don't even hear it like that anymore.
interesting. How do you hear it?
What I hear it is kind of as a if you're familiar with the term SME, subject matter expert, as a
Hmm.
super SME. Like this is the person, people within the business unit, within the organization, who they point to for clients to come and help solve the really chewy problems because you've kind of been there, done that, and are credentialized for that.
And so your focus is on talent development.
Yep.
So you mentioned earlier, other people are doing the acquisition.
Yep.
So you're not really dealing so much with, personality assessments and profiles of who should be hired. You're dealing with, these are the people we hired. Now, what do we do with them?
Exactly. From the onboarding through retirement, which is including how they learn, how they grow their careers, performance management, how they get into leadership, succession planning, all of that. And all of that really is based on their skills. So, maybe a side conversation would be the personality profile piece, because I've always found that really interesting and I've always been pretty skeptical of it.
Mm.
Um, but skills assessment really interested because that's what we really hang on is who are we getting in the door. So I do care about talent acquisition. I would not consider myself a thought leader in talent acquisition, but I've done work there. But really, it's because you cannot. It's the people part of work. The entire life cycle starts at acquisition and ends when you leave the organization. And so who you're getting in the door is going to inform all of the work that I do.
Okay. Yeah. So you need them to be giving you high quality raw materials, in essence, right? A good grade of lumber so you can begin your processes to transform those into, great producers. Now, you mentioned the personality test, which
Yeah.
I've made the observation for quite some time that, and I think this probably isn't true for IBM, given that they have you doing this role there. But, a lot of organizations, and I want to say that maybe they're more smaller, medium-sized, entrepreneurial types of ventures. But the fact is, sometimes they're really big established companies as well. They put an awful lot of attention and care into the hiring process, right? They'll spend however many dollars per applicant to run them through some, allegedly fancy psychometric testing to make sure they're getting the good people. And there's this almost religious devotion to, if I can just get the right people, if I can just get the perfect people. And I understand, we want to get somebody who's 100% the best fit for the job. And if we're hiring 100 people, we might be able to find 3 to 5 that are 100% good fit, right? And then we have to hire 95 other people who, in one way or another, are not exactly what we would want them to be if we would choose, right? And that's where development comes in. And sometimes these organizations just kind of punt when it comes to development. So, well, we're going to spend a lot of money on hiring, but then after that, we don't know. We pair them with a manager. We say that the manager is supposed to mentor them. Some managers do a good job. Other managers don't do a good job. I'm thinking, man, if hiring is important enough to spend some time and money on, then development seems like it should be much more important.
You're singing my song, Willie.
Oh, good.
Um,
So
yeah.
what, and these assessment, and frankly, I mean, there's a bunch of assessments and I've looked at several of them and I'm always a little bit underwhelmed by what they do and relative to the price that certain companies pay for them.
Yep.
But you do use those, or you get that information when people are coming and you're becoming concern of yours in terms of development?
I have never looked at one of those kind of personality tests in my role as a consultant. I have taken a jillion of them. I have an educational psychology background. I'm qualified to teach English and psychology at secondary schools in Texas. I love psychology, so I'm not bashing that at all. If you're using, and this is hearkening back to when I was first certified to do Myers-Briggs, there was a really clear notation that this is not meant for like hiring purposes, because if I'm an ENFJ, I am, but it's sort of this teacher profile. It's shocking. I actually I like Myers-Briggs, but I don't like it to say, oh, I'm hiring facilitators at my company. They should all be ENFJs. I just don't think it works that well, and I honestly think it can create bias by saying certain personality types fall into, we're only hiring for these personality types. I think it's problematic. Now, there are other assessments that in my graduate school, we looked at skill, will, and self-regulation. My professor, Claire Ellen Weinstein, who died several years ago, but she came up with a work assessment for that measured those things. And to me, skill, will, and self-regulation, that's not personality, but it is an assessment. And I think that those are fair things to look for in a company. That's
Now,
maybe a little far afield, but I think
I
it's
think that's
interesting.
great. So skill, just to make sure I understand exactly what you're talking about, skill in what? A specific type of skill or?
Oh, sure. So skill, let's say I'm a C++ programmer. Am I going to have some sort of assessment that says, yes, I actually am very qualified to do this job that requires a level 4 proficiency? Whatever those landing statements are for a level 4 is able to. I probably should have picked a metaphor I knew something about there, Willie. But anyway, the point is that you can assess on somebody's skill.
Okay.
And have it fairly granular. And in fact, we have a super cool tool. You can do a self-assessment or you could write out an assessment. We have a really cool tool that we use internally at IBM because we're big. And self-assessments, our former CEO had said, hey, we're going to have 40 hours. We need to be learning faster to stay ahead of the curve. And she put a stake in the ground that we're going to be 40 hours a year of training. They were at about 28. So this is before I got to IBM. And anyway, it's an awesome story. But one of the tools we have that they put in place, they said we're spending too much time on people doing assessments and self-assessments, and we're not sure if we really believe them. And we actually know how to develop AI and machine learning. And they developed a tool that's an expertise inference tool that can crawl across an employee's digital footprint within the company, things you've posted, articles you've written, documents, deliverables. It could be what you're saying in your Slack channel. It depends on where you point, and it's you get a decision on where you point. You're not crawling over absolutely everything. You're looking for good data sources, which could include resume sites. So anyway, it crawls across that, and it infers not only your skill, but your proficiency level. And at IBM, we run that every month for every single employee across 30 different data sources. And I always say, I think IBM's a little extra with that. But we do, you don't need to, the company does not need to go that wild with it. But you can then have people go back and calibrate against that. The individual can calibrate and say, yep, you got this mostly right, but you missed my one skill here, because maybe there's not a digital footprint for that. They have a skill, but it's not showing up anywhere.
Okay.
And the managers can look at that too. So skills are something concrete. And if I have a skill gap, this is back to your comment on being able to train somebody and what are we spending in development and learning. That's where that happens. And I think we underspent in development so long because people weren't seeing the rewards of it. So they'd spend money and they'd send people to these week-long courses face to face, and it cost a whole lot and it took people out of the market or doing their jobs, and they just weren't seeing the results from that. But now, again, with artificial intelligence, that's what's so cool. I love the technology. It's one of the things that brought me to IBM, because you can really scale and do really interesting things with what we call hyper personalization, which means that the machines know who you are and know exactly what skills you have and where your gaps are, and can offer up just the nugget that you need, which is super slick. And now, we went from the 23 hours of training per year. The first year we got to about, I don't know, 38 hours. We didn't quite make it. The second year we well surpassed 40. 5 years in, we're at an average of 80 hours per person, with the
Wow.
executives getting about 120. And we've seen productivity increase. So yeah, you're out of the market, but we have so much micro learning because it's feeding us these small little nuggets that we can learn just exactly what we need to learn, that we don't have to really step away from our desks. A lot of our clients, COVID threw the entire learning program into a mess because they had so much face-to-face or live virtual training, and they needed to go to a different model. They just needed to be more flexible, and we've helped some clients with that too.
So yeah, I love everything that you're saying, and obviously, the personality tests tend to have answer options that are like 1 to 7, agree, disagree, or to what extent does this describe you? Not very
Mm-hmm.
much to a great deal, right? And of course, people can be reading those and go, okay, I'm not neurotic. I'm not crazy. Yeah, I disagree with all the bad ones. I agree with all the positive ones. And they're very gameable and in my opinion, often not very reliable. The skills, yeah, if there's obviously this is great. If there's a right or wrong answer, I can actually assess it. This is very good. Now, this is talking about grit, perseverance. What are we talking about?
Motivation. So there are all kinds of different motivations, intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. I tend to anchor on skills. But except for, I'll take that right back. In my job, I anchor on skills, because really we're looking at how do we grow skills and grow people's careers. Great. But as you're looking at performance management and assessment, have you done a 9 box before, like with your team, to assess where people are kind of falling compared to their peers?
I actually have not. I've seen them.
So the 9 box usually has skill across the bottom, and it has potential on the y-axis. Drives me
Mhm.
crazy. I know I am a Susie Sunshine, but I think there's so much hubris involved with me telling somebody else what their potential is. That just drives me nuts. So when I had my own little LLC, I created a sort of a different model with skill across the bottom and will up at the top, because I could talk to my employee about what are your motivations? What are your aspirations? Are you climbing the ladder? How important is work to you in the big scheme of things? Are you happy to sit in your role as an individual contributor and really never get promoted? Where are you going with this? I can measure that.
Mm.
Or at least, if it's not a hard measure, I can feel like I have some data there. And with skill across the bottom and will going up the side, I can determine where a person may need to be developed. If they are low in, it's not rocket science. If they're low in skill, let's get them some training. Let's get them some different job experiences. Let's move them to a new role where they can grow. Or if they're new, they're just going to learn as they go. That's fine. If they're low in will, why is that? Is it a bad fit? Is it a bad manager? Or are they just happy being right dead in the center and are happy not moving? They're knocking it out, doing the job that they're doing, and all's good. So I think that's where motivation can play a good role.
That's great. So the ideal in that situation is somebody who is, low enough on a skill that they could improve, but also has the will to do so.
Right. Or they are go-getters. They're fired up, and we see a lot of the folks coming in our new generations, like they're fired up. They're ready to be CEO tomorrow. awesome. Let's get you the skills you need to go. So it goes either direction.
We're going to stop it right there for now. Please dive into the next episode of the Sales Lab to hear the conclusion of this interview. And by the way, if you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe and to rate this podcast on whatever app you use to listen. Also, share this with your colleagues and friends, and let's continue to have a deeper discussion on all things related to selling and sales leadership. See you next time in the Sales Lab.